Hi there. Welcome to A Creative Affair, a collection of conversations exploring creativity through the art of photography and other creative passions. I'm Bree, and I've been creating all my life. I'm a musician, and I've made jewelry, quilts, and furniture, but my current passion is nature and landscape photography. As a life coach, I help creatives reignite their creative passion and use it to achieve their unique vision in life. I love traveling and experiencing other cultures, and I have a beautiful scarf collection from so many beautiful places.
Oh, gorgeous scarves. Oh,
Yes.
I actually have a scarf collection too. And Brie, I should send you next time. I'm going to send you a scarf because I actually sell scarves
What?
in one of my little shops so that I have going, and they're covered in beautiful trees. Anyway, I'm Len. I'm an artist from the Blue Mountains in Australia. Uh, I prefer to call myself an artist rather than a photographer, because I love the idea that being an artist gives me a freedom from breaking rules, freedom to break rules, whereas a photographer has so many expectations of what a photograph should be. And I trained as an artist. I went to art school, and I draw and paint and do all those sort of things. I'm also a passionate environmentalist, hoping to save some trees. Yesterday, I got very upset just hearing that a few more might be chopped down. So I really do get upset about trees. And as you already know, I actually love hugging trees.
I do know this.
I'm glad you do. It's one of my absolute passions for photography is photographing trees. But let's move on. Today we're going to talk about what is creativity. I think that's such a special question. And what does creativity mean to us? What beautiful question. So I'm going to ask you, Brie, what is creativity to you, Brie?
Well, I have two answers.
Oh, good. I love that.
One is from a quote I shared on my Instagram account actually the other day, and it says, "Creativity." This is from James Russell Lowell. Actually, don't know who that is, but I like the quote, so I guess I'll find out who he is later. But I love what he says. Creativity. Actually, this is from Guy Tall's book, More Than a Rock. He always puts a quote at the beginning of one of his essays, and this is on the top of it. This is on the top of one of them. So it says, "Creativity is not the finding of a thing, but the making of something after it is found." So, and I love that. For me, creativity is like taking all of this, these raw materials, whether it's like notes or wood or, pieces of wire or yarn, because I'm a knitter. I mean, you've named it, I've done it all, but just taking those and being able to make it into something that's unique to me is really a special thing. So how about for you?
Oh, yes, I have to agree with you on that. Making something unique. I think unique's one of a beautiful word in there. But even if it isn't, I don't have to actually feel that it is unique. But making something is at the heart of creativity for me. Making something, and for me, the physicalness of making something is quite important. Making something new, something that's personal for myself. I do love making things for other people, but my greatest joy is creating for myself and making something that makes me incredibly happy. And there is so many different influences on that, isn't there? There's so many different ways of creating, and I love the idea that creativity isn't rooted in one particular discipline, that it's across so many around the whole world, and is as varied as there is people out there.
Yeah, I agree. And like I've actually I was reflecting on all of the ways that I've been creating. And I wrote a huge list, and it's really amazing to think about from the time I don't remember when I was born, but from the time I was I don't know if anyone remembers that, but from the time I was really young, I've always wanted to make things, and that's just the way I express myself. But I think so many people express themselves with words. That's absolutely creating. I know you've given some speeches. So many people create. I mean, we created this podcast, which is speaking, right? Like that's a creation. I mean, this podcast is not unique, but this one is for sure, right? No one's ever had this exact same conversation that we've had, and in this exact same way. And that is a really beautiful thing, to be able to take so many different ideas and combine them into something that's really, really special. So there's there's visual arts, right? Like, and I can even think of you can create science-wise, right?
Yes, very much so.
Right? Like people created vaccines, people created, I had a headache today. So somebody had to create the drug, like the that I took to kind of help ease my pain. My mom, she grows lavender, and she creates, I don't even know where I have it, but she creates essential oil. And I know it's not taking a unique thing, but it's hers that she grew and made it for herself, right? And then she uses it. So there's so many different ways that everyone around the world does this. And I think that's super fascinating. Have there been any unique, interesting ways that you've seen other people create?
There is. Just in art, and art's one of my absolute loves. Another love of mine is music, and watching people create music is a very big passion of mine, and then performing it. And I don't just see the idea of writing a song as being creation, but actually the art of performing is also a creative act. I want to go back, though, to something that you said when you were young, that you loved creating. And I actually think that this idea of creation is huge. And I think it's a driving force behind how we learn, that we are always experimenting and trying things out to figure out how the world works and how we should fit into it. And so I really believe that creativity is a natural phenomenon, and that we have an inbuilt drive to learn and to copy and to do things, and that it's there inside all of us. And unfortunately, I think sometimes society and the school system and other things, our parents maybe sometimes beat that out of us through, expectations and maybe through critiquing and saying it's not so good. But, go back to a child, you got a pile of mud and you make a mud pot. And then you sit there as a kid and you pretend to drink tea. Now, that is a creative act, isn't it? You've actually made something and then you go on to pretend something. And I think we all have creativity in us, and it's such a beautiful thing. And I think it's everywhere in our life. And things that you talked about, just having a conversation with someone else is like we're talking about here, or having right now, that is also a creative act. We're doing it non-stop throughout our lives, aren't we? We're in this process of making something new continually.
Yeah.
It's
And
so beautiful.
one thing that, that kind of sparked in my mind while you were talking was like that the attitude that kids have where they're just naturally curious. And if we could pull that from, and it's what I find myself doing a lot more often now. If we can pull that attitude, that innate curiosity, and into the way we live, then I think we can even be more creative and even have that more often. But I just find myself like, when I think of creativity, I think curiosity, because that feeling of curiosity, I think, drives me to do the creating, like we talked about in our first like introduction episode, right? Like when you messaged me and you were curious about what I did, and then I became curious about what you did, and all of that curiosity can spark so much of the actual the beginnings of the creating process. I just think that's a wonderful way to be, is curious and then getting creative.
There's something that immediately springs to mind, as well as being curious, is a propensity to take risks. And I think as a child, we take bigger risks. Even when we take our first steps, the risk is we're going to fall over, and we keep falling over and we keep hurting ourselves, yet we keep getting up and we keep trying until we start walking. And I think curiosity is one part of that ingredient, and another one is a willingness to play, to take risks, and to see what happens. So this curiosity, it's like opening a door to a shed and not knowing what's in there, and wanting to go in there and being scared. Maybe there's a monster in there or a snake or something, but a curious person wants to go in there into the unknown to see what's going to happen, and is not afraid to do that. And those two tie in so beautifully. Now, Bree, you said there were two things at the beginning. What was the other one?
Oh, wait, what two things? Oh, you know what? I don't remember now.
I was asked you what is creativity to you?
I got so involved in thinking about the curiosity, because it's been on my mind so much lately, that I think that took over my whole everything. But I would love to talk about how we each create, and then why we do it. So you want me to start?
Yeah, please do.
So I'll start. I wrote down here.
Why do you create?
Yeah. So let me talk about all the different ways I've created. And then maybe you as a listener, if you're listening, you can think about all the different ways maybe you've created things, or whatever you've created. It doesn't even have to be a thing, right? Because sometimes we can't touch them always. So when I was younger, I tried photography. Film photography. That didn't stick, so I'm doing it again now. But I've done all kinds of sewing, knitting. I tried drawing. I went through a phase where I loved drawing. I would copy these books and then try to do my own, and that was so fun. And I made these Fimo clay. I made these little clay jewelry things, and I created other jewelry. I've made quilts. And I've made all kinds of furniture for this house I'm in. I've also created babies. So that is a creative process. We won't talk about it. But
it better be creative. Well, I hope it is, because it's the most enjoyable part, isn't it?
Right. And they're unique, like the people I created, not necessarily on my own, but they're unique, right? I play flute. I've tried so many different kinds of ways of doing music, and also now I do photography. So as I was thinking about it, I'm like, I feel like I've done a lot of creative things, and sometimes my brain wants to trick me. Actually, recently, my brain was telling me that I was not a creative person. And I'm like, that is so not true. And so I had to make this list to remind myself of all of the things that, all of the ways that I have been creative and the things that I've tried. So that is how I've been creative. But why do I create? So I wrote these down so I wouldn't forget. I feel a lot of satisfaction when I'm doing the actual creating. All the things that are leading up to it, we can talk about that in a minute, but I feel so much satisfaction during the process and then afterwards as well. Like how proud I am of doing the work to create whatever it is. It's also a way I express myself on a personal level. And I think this is the same for you too. But also I feel like I am my true self when I'm in the creative process. And that's really special to me. Like there's something about the doing the making of whatever it is. And lately it's been photography. So if I'm out and in the landscape, I feel like I'm my true self because I'm connecting to my own soul in a way that just feels different than if I'm just like brushing my teeth. so
Is that because, Bree, that there's nothing else going on in there? Now, in a good way, that you're so focused on making something, and you kept saying all those lists of things that you just went through were so beautiful, and they were really focused on making things, furniture, cookies, filmo, sculptures, all those different things. There's so many of them are product-based, aren't they? And it's so different to brushing our teeth, isn't it? And we could be creative brushing our teeth as well, I'm sure. But
maybe, maybe you are, Lynn.
I actually have no teeth left, so I don't have any to brush anymore.
Oh, well, there
anyway.
That is not true, folks.
That's a fact you don't really want to know about. But so much of that was around product, wasn't it? And when you're making this thing, making it has this incredibly beautiful reward, doesn't it? And you have something that you can hold, or that other people can see, or that you have afterwards, and that drives you. So is it about being in the headspace, or is it about the product, or is it a bit of mixture of both there, Bree, for you?
I think it's a combination of all of it, because if it was just about the satisfaction, possibly because I give it away, or like if I'm making this something, but like even if I'm writing a blog post, that's a creative thing, and then I have it, right? And it's inspiring to other people. I think it's got to be the combination of it. So how about for you?
When you perform a musical piece, it's not so physical, is it? You can't hang on to it in your hand, but there's a very strong similarity in a reward and the beautiful feeling that you get from it. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I love being in the act of performing, because that's too is that connection between what I'm doing. Like I'm just like, there's something about it where I'm connecting to my own soul. Like it's resonating in a way that's different than just doing the mundane, driving to, the grocery store or whatever, and so it's expressing myself in such a unique way that in a way no one else can. So
I think that those two elements are so important. So one is the reward of making something and creating something that way, but then the other reward of and you keep saying your words are connecting to your soul. For me, that's very much about letting go of the rest of the world It's very much about focusing on something so much that nothing else exists. Um, if I'm creating photographic artworks, I'm there in the moment, observing, totally immersed, and the rest of the world doesn't exist. And that's my happy place. And I think it is about connecting to my soul. It's connecting to my inner part. And I notice I do it best when there isn't so much cognition
Yeah.
running around in my head, when I'm not thinking so loudly that my my words and thoughts are taking over, that I'm actually relaxed and absolutely so present in that space. I love those words, connecting me to my soul. I think that's
That
really beautiful, Brie.
That's more like, thank you. I hadn't actually expressed that into words until we were just having this conversation. So that's what's the beautiful thing about this, is that that I think it's sparking ideas within me as well. I think what you're talking about, Len, is that flow state. And we're going to have another podcast episode where we talk about flow state. And I'm really excited. This will be in the future sometime. We haven't decided when, but I'm really excited to talk about that. But that's what you're talking about, right? Is the flow, this state of flow where you've kind of let all of your all the chitter chatter go, and you are just in the moment, present, just releasing yourself to do the creative work.
Yep, very much so. Am I allowed to swear on here?
I don't know. Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. So anyway, I tell people I just love to make shit. And maybe that's an Australian saying, but it's so beautiful that making things physically with your hands, or making even electronically with images or whatever, or making music, is special in its own right, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's one is being in that state and getting there, and the other one is this concentrating on making something, and I find that incredibly beautiful.
Yeah. So why do you do it? What is your why?
My why for creating, you actually stole the words, not the wrong words for me, but the idea that it's my true self is incredibly important in this. It's my escapism from life. It's my happy place. It's my it's my personal reward. I've spent so much of my life teaching other people, and that's a very much an outward giving process, and it's incredibly exhausting, and it's my passion is teaching people. And I've given myself permission as I get older to spend more time creating for me. And it's very much a rewarding, a reward for myself to be a little bit more selfish, to make things for me, to make things that make me giggle and smile or laugh or feel sad or happy, or to show my respect, or to celebrate something's beauty. And they're all parts of that reason that it's a incredibly fulfilling thing for me. So much so that when I stop doing it, my body changes, and I notice that sadness creeps in, like it's something that I have to keep doing.
Ooh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I think I read something recently about we have this like desire, because we talked about how innate it is to create, that when we find the thing that we love to create, we want to be doing it so often. We're always like, I'm always trying to find when can I go out? When can I do photography? And that can even be in the editing process for me too. But it's always the driver. Like when can I go and do that and have that experience for my own self? So Len, you were talking about how it's something you're so passionate about. I want to know, what is your favorite something? It doesn't have to be a thing, but your favorite something that you've created, or something that you've created that you're really proud of.
Oh, the something. Um, oh, the okay. My absolute favourite is when I was at art school. So I was only in my just hit 21 or something. I think I was 20 something in there. And for my major at art school, I majored in photography. So I did 4 photography subjects in my final year and 1 printmaking subject. And I created a room, it was actually the copy room at art school, and I took out all the furniture and I turned it into my fake office. And I put my books in there, I put a desk in there, and I covered it with my things and my books, and I dragged in my plants, and I dragged in lounge chairs and a coffee table. And then I put 1 exhibition of photographs around the walls. So that was one of my major works, was a series of Cibachrome, they were Cibachrome in those days, prints, colour photographs of our beautiful sandstone slot canyons in the Blue Mountains around the walls, beautiful hand-printed colour photographs. And then I'd made a book, and it sat on the desk, so a handmade book. And it was a mixture of photographs, quotes and words. It was called "In Wildness is the Preservation of the Earth," which is a quote, the title of Elliot Porter's book, which is one of my favourite books of all time of photography, and particularly important to me when I was 18 years old. It also had drawings and my paintings in there, and drawings and lithographs in this handmade book. And then on the coffee table was a portfolio. And I put an empty pot of coffee in there as well. So when you went in, it had this coffee smell in there as well. And there was no windows, and you'd shut the door, and I had a light on in the corner. And one day I couldn't find my teachers, and I had 2 beautiful favourite teachers, Lynn Roberts Goodwin and George Schwartz, who George I owe so much to in learning photography and how to be an artist from. I couldn't find them. And someone said, "Oh, they're in the copy room, Len." And so they'd actually locked themselves in my little exhibition room. And when I knocked on the door, they said to me, "Len, you've made the most beautiful room in the whole art school here." And it was all full of wilderness photographs. And that was a reward from it, but that's what I was trying to create, this incredibly beautiful space. But that beautiful space was actually me. It was all about who I am that came through there. And I was so lucky that was so well received by my teachers. So that's there's something that I've created that I'm incredibly proud of. And as you can tell, I love telling people about it too.
That's the first time I've heard it. That's fabulous. Do you still have your handmade book?
Yeah, I've got all of the bits.
Fabulous.
Still, and I wish I'd taken more photographs as a document of it. And I got straight distinctions from that. And the painting teacher walked out and said, "Oh, more effing bloody photos of trees," and wasn't very, very grumpy. But the other 2 photography teachers stood fast and said, "No, this is absolutely brilliant," and gave me the highest awards and the highest marks. So I graduated with straight distinctions in photography.
Beautiful. Always the achiever.
Yeah. And then I put down my camera for 10 years, but that's another whole different story. So let's ask you the same question. What's something that you've created that is so special to you, Bree?
Well, I think my most recent creation that I'm I'm so proud of it's in the similar vein. It was I did it in March. It was a whole gallery show of my own photography, and there's something special about when you've taken a digital photo to be able to put it into print, right? Because if you've done it on film, you're most likely going to print it. But to make the digital image and then have it be on paper is to go through the editing process and have it come out as a 3D tangible something is like the first time it came through my printer was I bought a printer. That was really a special moment for me, and then being able to, I created walls. I actually built wood walls and took all the furniture out of my house and put up these walls and framed all of I think I had 17 images, and it was all about home and what it meant to me. And I wrote about it, and I kind of, you came in my front door and you went on this journey, and the whole thing all put together with the photographs and the printing and the walls and the whole show was, and the people coming to my house to interact with them, it was so special and beautiful, and something I'm always going to treasure and be super proud of, because there was so much work and effort that went into it, and so much of me that went into it, and such a unique, all the images were unique to me that it's almost indescribable, right? That people would come to my house to experience that. And even if I actually told my friend who came to visit me and help me, I told her, even if no one came to see this, it would be amazing. Like, because of the actual creation of it, which I think is such a beautiful thing, to just create something for yourself and that other people can enjoy, but creating it for yourself, like you were talking about, is probably why we do so much of what we do.
And it becomes addictive, doesn't it? We must get a hit of chemicals from this experience. One from making it, one from being in that state when we're making it, so that's part of it. And then when we have this product or whatever it is that we're doing, we get a kick from it there, and then we get another kick when someone else gushes over it, and we fall in love with that as well. And so there's so many different stages there in its life that for us to enjoy. I think it's addictive, and I'm hence why I'm still doing it. And I also think that that maybe is why you have spent a life of making things, because it's such an enjoyable process, isn't it?
Absolutely. I'm always trying to figure out. My brain is always working on a way to create things. Well, let's talk about. So I did some research, and this is kind of the nitty gritty of creation. Are you ready to talk about this, Len?
Yeah, please do. I love research, and I love exploring ideas to see where they go.
Yeah, and I think this is so fascinating. So, I've been mulling over this idea of creativity, and I've been trying to think about what is my process when I go to create something. What is the process or my process, and do other people kind of follow the same process? And I couldn't even put it into words. However, I did find there's a psychologist, and there's all kinds of articles you can read online about this. But in the 1920s, a man named Graham Wallace, he was an English psychologist, a social psychologist. He has a book called The Art of Thought. And I didn't create this. I didn't read the book, but it's everywhere. So he has he writes about the creative process, and he writes about it that there are 4 different stages of it. So the first one is preparation. So do you want to talk about that, Len?
Well, that stage is about gathering information, isn't it? Getting your materials, preparing yourself, learning to use the equipment to understand how things work, learning to see maybe, being prepared, setting everything up for success is such an important part of that. For me, also, it's preparing my mental state as well.
Yeah, I love that.
Not only is it a physical things being prepared for, but it's also my mental state. I need to be centered and in that mentally clear space to do so.
Yeah, and if like you think about like an artist has to say what kind of techniques do I need to learn? There are things that we all need to learn in a kind of a technical way, right? To be able to do some of the things that we need to do. Like so we're going to talk about goals later, but this gallery show that I just talked about was part of a big goal that I had. That's another podcast episode, which will be really fun to discuss. But I bought my full frame camera back in December. It's not even that long ago, but it's December of 2019. And so I had this camera and I thought, now what do I do with it? This is what I want to create. Now what do I need to do? And so there was I had to learn all of the technical stuff with the camera and what do all the buttons do and how do I set it up? And, because you can't actually be in the creative process when you're still just learning how all the buttons to something work and how do you actually, like, what is the exposure triangle? Just all of those little nitty gritty things, the technical details that we have to kind of know before we can really express ourselves. So do you have anything to add to that one?
Well, I think that's different for each person. And
Sure.
I've met people, one of my students turned up one day and she definitely felt an imposter syndrome because she didn't know all of those things that you were talking about, all those technical things. And yet her photographic art was absolutely stunning and beautiful. So she had a drive to want to know how everything worked. So she could justify herself for her own beautiful art. And I used to always say it doesn't actually matter. You obviously know enough to make it work for you. And I think each of us is incredibly different as to what that preparation looks like and what we need to have ready to be comfortable. And that's incredibly different for each of us. Some people, for example, really love to have a really solid plan and an idea about what they're doing, and others just like to show up and be there and be present.
Yeah.
And then see what happens, and it's different for each of us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really beautiful insight. Like we know, I've known people who can play piano, and they don't even need to read notes. They can just sit down and play a piece of music from their mind. I mean, you do have to be able to have the kind of the beginning piano instruction sort of to do that, right? So there is some of it that, those basics that we kind of need to know. But I just think it's so interesting. And the point of all of these different stages, by the way, is just to kind of see where we might be in a creative process. And it doesn't exactly have to look like this, of course. Like, we're talking about creativity here. Like, this is not a cut and dry process for anyone. So the second one is incubation. This is really fun. I actually really enjoy this stage. This is, well, I'm kind of reading off what I wrote down here, but this is where we have all of that information that we gathered in this, like the prep stage, and then we kind of let it simmer right? And we just and this can look this obviously is going to look different for everyone, but I just love the idea of thinking and marinating on something and kind of going over like the raw materials, like if I'm going to build something. So I built furniture for my house. Like, how would all those things work together to make, such and such? Like, how could I do that? And just letting all those ideas, yeah, kind of work in my mind, because I think our brains. So then this is interesting too. And I don't know, have you noticed this, Len? Like, I can be awake during the day and my brain is chewing on something. I can tell, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also, I can tell that my subconscious is also working on it, because all of a sudden, something that I'm not even thinking about will just come to me. And right. And so having that prep stage ahead of time where we have all the kind of the raw materials, and then our mind being so powerful to be able to like shift things around and kind of do its work and have fun putting kind of like Legos, putting those things together like a puzzle, and then we have the third stage. So do you have anything to add to the second one?
But before we go on there.
We want to stop. But we want to keep everyone in suspense. But I want to know what you have to say about this incubation stage first.
I'm so pleased that you brought up this idea about the subconscious mind working on it, because when we look at things like this theory of stages of creativity, being a conscious thing, so much of it is actually unconscious. And I have firmly come to the belief that our unconscious mind is so much more powerful and bigger and works harder and does all the heavy lifting, and our consciousness just does such a small part of it. And it doesn't seem to stop, does it? It processes at night when we're asleep. It just keeps going. And sometimes these ideas, these breakthroughs, these moments happen at innocuous times, and they also happen, often they have happened for me without consciously thinking about anything to do with it. So
yeah, like where I'm thinking about something else.
Yeah,
or I'm in the shower thinking about nothing.
But I've been sort of mulling over something and it's going, oh, that's not quite right. But I haven't been actively searching out that final answer there. And something just pops into my mind and goes, oh, hang on. And it's this really big breakthrough moment coming from the unconsciousness. And I think the lesson there as an artist definitely is that you need to build that into your workflow. It has to be part of your practice, giving things time to mellow, to allow that conscious, unconscious or subconscious mind to do its job. Sleep on it. We have that language is in our language, isn't it? Oh, I'm going to sleep on it. What a better thing to do. It's a wonderful thing to do. And sometimes it's sleep on it for a month. It doesn't have to be just for a night.
Right. Or I liken it to going back to, like, if we're taking pictures locally, going back to the same place over and over again, kind of gathering these ideas. And then all of a sudden my mind will go, what if I go at this time and this time, or, and I'll have some sort of breakthrough. Or if you take the time, or for me anyway, if I am out and I take the time to just sit or walk quietly and let my mind kind of absorb whatever I have going on, just whatever's going on in the landscape, then I'll have ideas come to me. Oh, that could be interesting, or I could go over there, So I think it's those kinds of things where we are quiet. And I agree with you, Len, that like just having that quiet time and then being patient to kind of to let our minds, our super smart brains, do their jobs.
Yeah. And how often has it been that the first time you visit somewhere, um, the photos aren't really that remarkable, but as you get to know it and keep revisiting it and look at your work and then get to know the sense of place, your work keeps improving. That's an incubation as well, isn't it?
I think
It's
so.
also an experimentation, I think, and a beautiful playfulness to be able to do that. So many people I meet, uh, they expect to walk in, do something brilliant, finish, and leave again. But for me, that's not at all what's happening.
Yeah, or and maybe we can talk about this in another episode, but we can talk about expectations. Like we go someplace brand new, right? That's what you're saying. And we expect to make something amazing. And sure, have we done that? Yeah, sometimes. Is it likely? Maybe. Maybe not, right? But it's just allowing ourselves to be in the place for longer, really. And I think that shows in our images that we have that sense of connection to a place, right? Because we have absorbed it. We have allowed our minds to do this incubation period with the landscape. So, and you
So,
talk.
Bree, what's the third one? What's
Well, I
the,
was
the
going to
third
say.
step?
I was going to say we each touched on this third step. We talked about this kind of aha moment, like our brains work on it, and then it's the aha moment, and that is the third step. It's illumination, right? It's the aha. Oh my goodness, our brains we finally put it all together, right? When we know exactly what it is, maybe not exactly like how to do it, but we have this, all of a sudden we have this vision. And actually, I had to tell you, this happened for me in the shower. Do not picture it, friends. Okay, but when this is called a creative affair. Do you remember?
I can't help but not.
So when I had this idea that I wanted to create this gallery show, I didn't know where. I thought maybe in my home, and I had decided because of the pandemic. If you're listening to this, not a pandemic, it's pandemic COVID, and I decided to have it in my home for various reasons, and I had been trying to think of how in the world I could make this work with my house, and I had all kinds of this incubation stage going on in my mind, and trying to like chew on all of these different ideas of ways that I could present my images. And I'm in the shower, and all of a sudden I had this aha. It felt like a light bulb went off, and I know you all know what I'm talking about. I swear everyone has had this light bulb moment, right? You have, right, Len?
Yeah, I've definitely had them. I have them regularly.
Yeah. And so
they're magical.
yeah, they are magical. And I had this light bulb moment go off, and I knew exactly, it was like it unfolded before me. I remembered these walls, and I knew I could make them. And so that's what I did. I didn't know how they were all going to go together and what it was going to, exactly how it was going to turn out, but it was like really this aha moment. So do you have anything else to say about the aha?
Yeah, well, sometimes it doesn't happen. And sometimes
right?
sometimes it isn't a eureka moment or this aha moment. It's a slow realization that it's right. I use this to confirm how I like my work. I'll print it out and I'll stick it on a wall I've got here in my studio, and I leave it there for months. And I keep looking at it, and there isn't this sudden moment of, yeah, it's right, or that's all perfect or anything. It just grows really slowly. And I find that when I'm out taking photographs as well, in that creative moment, that there doesn't have to be this specific moment. And so I'm not always chasing it. I just let them come when they're going to come, and actually not think about them and worry about it. I think that's an important part of this, is that when we try to force creativity, it's hard. And we can't force ourselves through these different stages or different steps in it or wherever it is. We've got to relax and be wherever we need to be at that moment, mentally, physically, and in the terms of doing and creating.
Yeah, that is such a great reminder that I think I talked about patience earlier, but having that patience to just let it come, because if we allow ourselves to be agitated that it hasn't come yet, for sure it's going to keep us from having the realization. It's going to keep us a little longer, right? So if we can be patient and just trust ourselves that we're going to get that at some point, right? I love the idea of trusting myself, that I will be able to do it, right? That I'll be able to create it. I just need to maybe gather some information and then let it simmer.
And that comes back to what I said early on about having a confidence to take risks. And a part of that risk taking is relaxing and letting it come to you, rather than forcing it to come to you. And it's really a strong, like a self-efficacy, isn't it? A belief that it's going to happen. And when you do know, and you after practice and practice and practice, you know that it's eventually going to come. The work will come. That exciting bit will come. It's just you don't necessarily know when and or how, or some of those other things, but you still keep working at it. It comes more often, and it comes more easily. And for me, it comes in waves. Is a beautiful way of thinking about it. The fourth step there, Bree, what was that one?
Sounds so technical. It's verification.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't it sound technical? Verification. So this is after we have kind of that, our minds confirm to us that this is what we need to do. It could be the aha moment or the slow realization that Len talked about, right? That's when we're actually, that's when we actually do the work, right? So you said you put up your photograph, and it could be that you did the creating. Like, this could have been a multiple steps where you're kind of spiraling back and going, oh yeah, I like that. And then maybe coming back to it. Oh yeah, I like that. And so, I'm relating this like right now in my mind to this, gallery show that I have since we talked about it. It doesn't have to always be that, but this is where after we have that moment, then we go off and we make it come to fruition. Like, we really make it happen, and we let our creativity go. And I feel like I've seen painters. You're a painter. I'd love to see you paint, Len. But I've seen videos of painters, of not that person, of painters like in the, I'm sure they've already had that aha moment. This is what I need to create, and they're then doing it, like in the painting process. And I know the painting process looks different for everyone depending on your medium, but if you're in the process of doing it and in the creating, that's where you want to be in, like, the flow state, and you're creating, and that's where it all comes together, right?
Yeah, very much so. It's fascinating. It's the similarities in all the art, across so many of the art mediums, and our photography. Our love photography is just one of them, and painting's another, and music is another one. The actual artwork itself tells us where to go. The process of being creative actually leads us down the path. And I'm reminded of a Picasso quote just suddenly here. He says the hardest thing about creativity is actually showing up for work each day. And once you're there and you're in it and you're in that moment, and it's telling you where to go, and you're listening and following it, it leads you down its own path. And I think that's an incredible part. And for me, stepping back and allowing myself to be taken down that path. And so that's what Picasso was saying. I just have to show up and be present. That's the hardest part all the time, rather than showing up with I've got to do this and this is my really strong idea, or I've got to have this moment of illumination. Showing up and actually working at it and being there. It's interesting because... Oh, sorry.
And yeah. I want to add that not only do we have to be there in person, but we've got to be there with our minds engaged too. So I think that's that is the huge part of it, right? Like we can show up in person, but if our minds are elsewhere, like we want to show up, like when I show up, I want to show up with my whole mind focused on what I'm focused on, because that's how I'm going to get the most out of whatever I'm doing. Right? So, leaving all of the chatter behind and just showing up. I love that Picasso quote, because to me that means body and brain.
Yeah, that's right.
Showing
Being
up.
Present.
Yeah.
How do you be present? I think that's a great idea for a topic. I put it on our list of topics to talk about, Bree.
Len and I have these conversations and we're always adding. We had one right before when we were prepping, and we added 2 or 3. So we're
That's
always
right. The
adding
list
to
grows.
this. Right. So I will say this. I mean, we'll end a little bit, but if you have any ideas for us in the podcast, email us. And we'll tell you at the end of the podcast, but just keep them coming. We love that.
It is fantastic.
And I want to add too, like in this process, in this creative process we talked about, that this is not a linear thing. We are creatives. So this isn't like step 1, step 2, step 3. This is for this. We just wanted to discuss this to give some awareness about what the process could look like, or where you might be. Like if you feel like you might be stuck, maybe you're not. Maybe your just mind is like simmering, right, in this incubation period, right? And so it could be more like a back and forth zigzag, or kind of a spiral, or any other way that our minds might decide to do these things.
And it's just a model, isn't it? And what is a model? It's a way of thinking about and describing something that may or may not happen. It's not an instruction manual. It's not a set of steps that you have to follow. We talk about models as a way, and I love the word illumination. It's about illuminating our practice. So I definitely agree with you there that it doesn't have to look like this, and we don't need to strive about it. But just by stopping and thinking about our own workflow and our process and the way we work under some of these big picture headings is incredibly helpful. And you can go, oh, actually, maybe if I become a bit more cognizant about that one, or I understand how that's working for me, or I think creativity is such an emotional process, isn't it, Bree?
Yeah.
It has its ups and downs. It has its frustrations and its stresses. It has its absolute joys. It has our moments of absolute adoration and beauty and love and so many gorgeous things as well. But it also has these moments where it's not going anywhere. What's wrong? And if we understand, well, maybe I just need to let it incubate for a while.
Yeah,
maybe I just need some time off. Maybe I need to go for a walk, or go and wash the dishes, or cook dinner, or go and see my friends.
Or just think, maybe nothing's gone wrong.
That's part of the normal practice, isn't it?
Yeah, nothing. Yeah. Like our brains want to tell us like something's gone wrong, and maybe it hasn't, right? Yeah. So how do we know what we should create?
Oh, that's can I answer that? Okay, for me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Please. I love this question because I'm incredibly passionate about it, Bree. And that is because one is that we feel good about it. So there's a beautiful, if we're doing it for love and for enjoyment and we get so much out of it, well, then we want to get something out of it. So when we're doing something that isn't giving us that, maybe that's one of those questions to ask, well, am I doing the right thing? But I notice, and this is after years and years of teaching art and being an art teacher, people's best work, their best work is what they should be creating. And I find that absolutely fascinating that, you take a photographer, they might try portraiture, they might try taking photos of flowers, of landscapes, trees, street photography, still lifes, and inevitably their best work, when you look at all of those ones when they're off experimenting, is the one that they love the most, the one that they have the strongest emotional connection with. What stirs the emotions the most, I think, comes through in their art. So the things that I should be creating are the things that I love the most.
So are you saying
that's my answer.
Are you saying we should try a lot of experimentation?
Oh, yes, if you don't know. And how many people know? I think this has been my personal journey through art, is learning what I love. And it's interesting, Brie, I've come back to where I started.
Trees?
I try all these things. Yeah, I was drawing trees as a kid.
Well, you know what's funny is I've always been drawn to rocks, and in this journey I had some idea of what nature and landscape photography looked like, and finally I just gave myself permission to take pictures of rocks and patterns, and I love that. I feel so great when I'm doing that, So, and I have there's some other landscapes I'm pretty passionate about, but so I'm also curious too if we've done one kind, if we kind of have recognized what we're passionate about, should we keep experimenting?
Well, of course we should. Isn't that being creative?
I mean, should we stick to one thing, or do we keep experimenting to see if something else we might be passionate about that, and then maybe how those things combine? I mean, I think the answer is yes, right?
Yeah, well, that's how we discover who we are, by pushing those boundaries and going out further to see what's going on in there and what excites us. And I think part of this is that we try harder. We put more feeling into our work. And through this experimentation, we're actually we're discovering our emotions and feelings towards things. And I think just like being an interesting and a helpful human being to society, by exploring and finding out more and more and pushing, and there's no final spot. It's such a beautiful way to think about our art, that let's keep pushing, let's keep experimenting, let's keep seeing where it takes us. And what happens when we spend some of that time pursuing things that we know that we love, and then we also spend some time pursuing things that confront us, or that maybe we're uncomfortable about, and or that we're scared of, to see where they take us.
Yeah, and that would be interesting, right? And if you try it and you don't really love it, you don't have to do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. It's an experimentation.
Totally. So I actually asked a question on Instagram. I asked some people. Yes, I asked. You can in your Insta stories, you can ask. You can ask questions and interact with people. And so I just posted a question. Why do you create? So I'm going to read some of the answers, if that's okay.
I'd love to hear them.
Okay. So, and I'm not going to say names. I'm just going to read them. So, and I'll message the people who who wrote these and tell them what we did. So one person said, because creativity releases happy neurons in my mind.
Mm.
And this person also said, because it makes me happy. Someone else said, for my own satisfaction. Right? That's what we talked about, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So someone else said, it gets me outside and gives me self-satisfaction. I'm seeing a trend. Someone else, another photographer. By the way, these are all photographers because that's my circle. You could ask this if you're not a photographer, or you could ask this of your circle. That'd be fun. So wouldn't that make an interesting discussion, Lynn? You know?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. Why'd you do that? So another person says, to conquer and achieve that feeling of, wow, I did that. And then he says, create or die. That's kind of how we feel sometimes, right? Like, I have to do this. I am compelled. It is my reason for living, you know. So someone else says, to put my feelings, my vision on paper, to share what my mind saw when my eyes looked at something. And then another friend of mine says, I find peace spending a few hours in nature away from the issues that plague this country. He's in the U.S., so it's kind of crazy here now. But yeah, I love all those reasons, and I'm so grateful for those people that shared. We all have our different reasons for why we do it.
And that's the point, isn't it? The reasons behind it is incredibly varied, and yet there's a lot of similarity in them as well. And it's for self-satisfaction or some sort of reward in there. And I so often find myself saying this to people when I'm teaching and mentoring and looking after them is, you're doing this for love, aren't you? I rephrase it maybe as a question, like, you're doing it because you enjoy it. When they're having that frustrating moment, and just to remind them to let go and to not hang on to things so strongly, because all those reasons were enjoyment reasons, weren't they?
Yeah.
You know, so beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful.
Well, Bree, we always have such fantastic conversations.
I agree.
Aren't they great? I always feel so uplifted and illuminated and bouncy after these. I've got my full day ahead of me now, and I can bounce out of my studio in such a good mood. But I really think here that the big question that I'm asking myself, and I want you to ask yourself as well, why do you create? What do you get out of being creative? And I think there's incredible value in asking that. And for me, Bree, it's a question I've asked throughout my whole creative life, and not something that I'm only just asking once. It's something that goes continually on, and I've been creating for many, many years, being an old man. Anyway, so please ask yourself that question and think about it. And we invite you, and we'd love to keep the conversation going with you. And you can engage with this conversation. You can email us at creativeaffairpodcast.com. And we'd love to hear you. And talking about Instagram, we'll get an Instagram thing up and eventually, and you can chat to us there too.
It should be up by now.
Oh, should it?
By the time this airs, yes.
Well, it's sort of coming to the end here. I did want to mention that I have a beautiful quarterly journal of photography that I publish based on creative photography, people working in series. And I run a photography school here in Australia, and I do workshops and mentoring, and I have an online school, and I mentor people all around the world, and I have hundreds of hours of videos there. And if you really just want to have a look at my art, visit my website, lenmetcalf.com, and it's a gallery that I keep adding to. In fact, I added 3 new photos just this morning to my gallery, and that's so exciting.
I'll have to go look at them. It's the end of my day. So, and everyone, it is a beautiful gallery that Len has and a beautiful journal. I subscribe to it and I love it. So, and one thing I love doing is I love helping creative people keep their creative passions flowing. So if you're feeling stuck, I can actually teach you how to create what you want whenever you want. So you can just go to creativemindscoach.com and sign up for a discovery call and we'll talk about it. And as always, links to all of these things, all of the websites that we talked about are going to be in the show notes you can visit us at creativeaffairpodcast.com. And if you enjoyed our episode, please make sure to subscribe, or you can follow us on your favorite podcast app, and more to come soon after this. So Len, this was such a beautiful conversation. I always enjoy them. And I feel like it's time to say goodbye, and I'm so sad about it. But until next time, have fun with your art and your creative passions.
Well, Bea, it has been so wonderful, and I wish you well until we next talk again. And I get so excited in the lead up to these conversations. And again, it was such a beautiful conversation. So thank you very much for that. And goodbye to all our listeners.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
See you the next time.